Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are today. We are pleased to be with you today. Welcome to our session, Prepaid is Eating the World. My name is Jennifer Tramontana, and I am the Executive Director of the Canadian Prepaid Providers Organization, or the CPPO. And we are the association that represents the prepaid industry in Canada. And we've got an incredible panel of experts here today to talk to you about how consumer preferences, as we know, are shifting towards more convenient, cashless, and contactless ways to pay. And prepaid is providing both incumbents as well as new fintech entrants a perfect avenue to introduce new products and services that still adhere to regulatory requirements in Canada. Prepaid is really driving payments innovation in our ecosystem and helping us fulfill the vision for true digital banking and payment solutions. So I would like all of our panelists to introduce themselves so that you get to know them over the next hour here. So let's start with Julie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Juli Spottiswood. I'm the chairman and CEO of Onbe. We are a global provider or issuer of corporate funded payments. We issue on behalf of some of the largest brands in the world to consumers, to employees, to gig workers, you name it. So we issue an awful lot of prepaid, but we've also gotten into other payment modalities, including push to debit.
Great. Gaurav.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gaurav Kapoor. I'm head and co-founder at Mydoh. We're part of RBC Ventures. Mydoh is a teen banking platform that helps parents raise money-smart kids. Our vision is to make it easier for every parent in Canada to set their kids up for success with the money values, skills, and experience they need, especially through their formative years. It is built using prepaid rails. We first verify identity of the parents to give them a reloadable prepaid card, and then they can invite a kid, and then kid also gets a reloadable prepaid card that they can use to spend and save. So it's a full gamified way of building the platform.
Thanks, Scott.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Johnson. I run sales and business development with Galileo. Galileo is a payments platform that enables all sorts of program managers and fintechs to run their various types of constructs on our platform. We work with a number of the leading program managers and fintech companies in different types of verticals, a lot in prepaid, but also in small business and commercial and other types of industries. We work with a lot of the leading issuing banks as well, everything from a lot of the BIN sponsor banks with People's to other banks like, as Gaurav is very familiar with, Royal Bank of Canada, and different types of constructs that we can enable in various types of things we're going to talk about today. So that's where we really sit in the ecosystem.
Thanks, Scott. And Chanddeep.
Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks, everybody, for joining this panel this morning. Really appreciate your time. My name is Chanddeep. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Aya Payments. Aya Payments is a health spending and wellness spending account company based in Toronto, but we have offices and people, thanks to the pandemic, all over the globe now, which has been very, very helpful to build a really diverse team in the payment fintech platform. What we like to do is really empower individuals to take care of their own health and wellness by empowering employees to make decisions on how they need to spend on their health spending and wellness spending through a prepaid MasterCard. And that really empowers these people to do that without having their employer or the insurance carrier have to determine where the money should be spent when it's for the employee's benefit.
Thanks, Chanddeep, and thanks for all of you for joining us today. This is certainly a panel of experts to have a conversation about prepaid and its role moving to digital banking and payments. So a quick housekeeping note to our attendees. We've got a lot of time here today. We've got until 55 after the hour, wherever you're located. And our goal is to have a conversation amongst a few of the sort of key topics and themes that we're seeing in prepaid and how it's affecting the overall prepaid and payments ecosystem. But we'd like to have a conversation with you. So please feel free to put comments or questions into the chat, and we'll work those through our conversation today to make sure that we're chatting about the themes that are most interesting to you. But let's just kick off and sort of start with kind of what's happening with prepaid today in terms of growth. And I want to just let our panelists and our attendees know, we at the CPPO just completed some research, like at the end of last week. We haven't released it yet on the prepaid market in Canada, but here's a couple of key things that we've learned. In Canada, we now have approximately 90 companies that are operating in the prepaid space, and that's up from 72 last year. 16% of all pay tech companies in Canada are now prepaid companies, and 38% of our challenger banks are built on prepaid rails. What's also interesting is that prepaid offerings in Canada are only about half from Canadian companies, and the other half come from the US and overseas. So I'd like to kick off with each of our panelists and ask them, obviously prepaid continues to grow substantially in Canada. What are the newest and most significant use cases that we are seeing? Julie, I'd love to start with you.
Thanks, Jennifer. I don't know that I would necessarily say new as much as expanding. So we at Onbe have had a lot of activity in Canada on the consumer rebate side. That's nothing new. That's been around. However, there's a lot of new industry segments that have entered the rebate space, hence getting into prepaid. Where I would say things are maybe a little bit newer is utilizing prepaid for whether it's gig payments or for customer appeasement or loyalty. The use cases are really endless, and it's a way to provide really immediate gratification to an end user, primarily through the use of virtual prepaid cards.
Scott, I'd love to go to you next because you also have a pretty broad view of this. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing?
Yeah, one of the nice things about where we fit in the ecosystem is we work with a lot of different companies that run a lot of different types of constructs on our platform, and we're seeing some really cool new and innovative things that have really come to market maybe over the last 12 to 18 months. Certainly we've seen the growth in challenger banking, and we've seen that in a number of different geographies, but certainly in Canada, and I don't think that trend is going to slow down at all. I mean, we're seeing continued steady kind of month over month growth in challenger banking, and I think that you are going to continue to see that. But there's other areas as you start to segment out, some of these newer innovations that we're seeing that are running on our platform. A couple in particular that I wanted to highlight. One we're certainly seeing, I'll let Gaurav talk a little bit about, kind of in the parent-teen space. A lot of really cool constructs that are coming out in that space, to really try and have, the right type of platforms to enable parents to really help, their children not only understand where to spend their money, but really to help in controlling some of that and some of the really great technologies and APIs that we can enable, with our partners to really limit even down to, when a card is tapped or dipped or swiped of exactly where that card can and can't be used. So it's a really nice, construct that can be enabled. And we're seeing some really great innovation in that space. We're seeing some innovation in the crypto space. Now, this is one that we're seeing more and more as well, where we have partners who are saying, if you wanted to, go out and buy your Starbucks coffee with a cryptocurrency. Now, some of our partners will sell and put that into fiat first, or some might actually be involved in an authorization API process where they can actually go out and maybe they're selling, depending on what Bitcoin's out today, 0.000005639 of a Bitcoin for that transaction. So there's really, really cool, innovative, types of products that are coming to market that way in the crypto space that we've seen lately. The other one that I'll mention briefly that we're seeing more and more innovation in is in the small business space. So we are seeing more, real-time type of lending scenarios that are being used, whether it's a business prepaid or other type of construct, to where, if a small business needs lending. So let's say that, if they've got a merchant account or whatever it might be, and they're able, the provider is able to lend on those receivables. We're seeing a lot of programs being created that way and brought to market, all, with the disbursement being done in real time through an API onto a prepaid card or account. So a lot of really cool constructs that we're starting to see evolve more and more over the last kind of 12 to 18 months.
It's funny, between the two of you, you guys hit on the research that I just alluded to. The key trends that were pulled out included teen banking, challenger banking, real-time earnings and gig, crypto, e-commerce expansion, and corporate B2B. So we didn't meet ahead of time to talk about this, but it certainly plays out with what both of you have just said. But Gaurav, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts in general, and then of course we'd love to know a deep dive a bit into teen banking and what that's going to look like going forward.
Yeah, for sure. See, when we started the platform around teen banking, it was a decision which we made around using the prepaid rails. It just allowed us that sort of flexibility to be able to create a relationship between a parent and a kid from a payment perspective, but also the flexibility around the APIs, which Scott was talking about, enables us to gamify the system and truly make it a fun experience versus a learning presented as a that you have to learn through this platform, because no kids want to learn more than what they already are told to learn. So that essentially became the backbone for us from a day one, that let's use prepaid as a flexible platform and build a use case on top of it. There are a lot of sub use cases within it, which this platform allows us. For example, putting in specific limits around the kids. You want to intercept the authentication side, you can do that. You can also hold funds within this prepaid card to make savings more experiential. You can make it goal specific use cases where kids can save and their funds get held in separate buckets. So all those are like just going deeper into the whole teen banking space. It allows us a ton of flexibility. But apart from that, like generally, even putting on a broader RBC lens, where we've seen like similar to what Scott was saying, we've seen in the B2B space that we are building some use cases and using prepaid, and we're also seeing on in the embedded finance, especially around the lending side, as through the checkout, that this is a very flexible platform. Which allows us to do quick POC and check if this would work in that area as well.
Thanks. And Chanddeep, you guys at Aya Payments are doing some really interesting things. Tell us a little bit about that and what you what you see here as how prepaid is going to continue to grow over the next couple of years.
Thanks, Jennifer. What's fascinating is I just came from a presenting to our investors, and they're fintech investors, and they're Canadian based, but they also have deal flow coming in from throughout the country as well as abroad. And the number one line item that I saw on there of companies still being formed that are new was payments, and majority of them were still prepaid. So I found that very fascinating that these are back to back, and even today the deal flow that investors are seeing is still centered around this. So I don't think that this is going anywhere. I definitely think this is expanding, especially as you see new entrants coming into the market like ourselves playing in this space. Now, we have, unlike typical startups, just because of the founding team, this is our 35th financial product in the market and our first in Canada. And our previous company was focused entirely on prepaid. And with this one, we are very much focused on putting our first product out there with prepaid as well. And when we talked about different use cases, one of the things that doesn't usually get mentioned and almost gets forgotten about is healthcare and insurance when you look at where markets are growing, because it's traditionally a space where you've got these behemoths and large corporations that really control that flow, and it's in their best interest not to make claims easy, because you have more revenue when you don't make that easier. And prepaid is coming in and really saying, and our goal, when I say we like to empower individuals for their health and wellness. So when you do that, you're really putting the power and the ability to make claims and to use the money that the employers are giving to employees quite quickly and quite easily, which goes counter to what typical health insurance stands for. So we're seeing a lot of innovation in this space, and that's primarily why we started in this space too. With our background, we could have played in anywhere. Like in our previous company, we were doing corporate expense management and working with credit unions to white label our product, working with every Lowe's hardware store in the United States carrying our product. So, different domains that this prepaid could play in, but really now focusing on healthcare insurance, our focus is, can we take a prepaid product and make it so easy for an individual that when they're paying for their health insurance and they need, let's say, a pharmaceutical drug, they walk into a Shoppers or a CVS, they can use the prepaid card, tap it, And then our app says, hey, we need you to take a photo of the receipt. They take a photo of the receipt, and we do full machine learning adjudication on it. And what this allows us to do, really getting all of the data, working with Prepaid and working with the user and the MasterCard rails and the Prepaid rails, it allows us to build a system where we can take every single claim and adjudicate it, which is 20 times what typical insurance companies do. Like companies that are, as like all the companies combined, like when you're looking at the large 5 insurance companies, they're only reviewing 5% of claims. And we review 100% of claims, and we make it easy. So you no longer have to pay out of your own pocket, file a form, send a fax, send an email to get reimbursed, because there is no reimbursement, right? You just use the card that your employer is giving you. You as the employee are determining where that money should go, right? It's your body. We give you that power to make that decision for yourself, versus your insurance carrier saying, hey, you can spend $500 on a chiropractor, but you can't spend $550 because your insurance only allows you this much, right? So really using the power of Prepaid, using the technology of Prepaid to give that decision-making autonomy to the final user is what we look for. And we're building more and more solutions in this space. One of the areas that we're moving Prepaid technology to is this area of self-insurance. Now, people are generally not aware of this, but 60% of all employees in US and Canada work under this model of self-insurance. So they don't even know it. You typically don't know it unless you're deep in the weeds of your healthcare benefits. And all of this can be transitioned to Prepaid. And that's the innovation that we are doing now moving forward, is how do we take this massive economy and move this all on Prepaid so that people can make those decisions and take control of their own body.
So I think this is an interesting, just listening to all of you talk about, first of all the incredibly varied use cases that Prepaid is both supporting and enabling and driving forward for us. And then also I keep hearing how, Prepaid is the technology to get things done. And I'd love to dive into that a little bit deeper. So, I've worked in the prepaid industry for more than 15 years. Julie and Scott, you guys more so than me. I don't know your exact years, but have been in real veterans for this. And, over the years, we've heard things like, that prepaid's going to be eclipsed by something else, or maybe it's not the most innovative platform. And we know we've got options with debit, credit, and prepaid. I'd love to hear really from both of you why it continues to be the platform of choice to enable non-banks to get into the fintech ecosystem, and what that looks like kind of going forward. So Scott, maybe we could start with you for a little bit of a historical perspective, and why you still think the most innovative companies in the world that you deal with continue to choose this platform.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the thing that's interesting is you kind of look at this and how things have evolved. And why Prepaid and the companies that work in Prepaid and the platforms that support these constructs have continued to be very successful and continue to be innovative. I think a little bit of it goes back to and I'll even go back not too terribly long, but you look at the investment that is flowing in and the funding that's coming into these types of companies and platforms that have chosen to work in Prepaid. It's unbelievable to see the hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that has continued to come into this space, because I think that with Prepaid and the various types of constructs it can support, it's oftentimes synonymous with innovation. You have companies that are really looking at very specific problems that they're trying to solve by using their platforms and Prepaid to solve those problems. We were talking a little bit earlier about parent-teen. That's a space that's been problematic for years of how to really crack the nut there. And now there's platforms and constructs that can solve those types of problems. I think the same thing now, not that I'm here to talk and preach solely about cryptocurrency, but everyone's trying to still kind of get their hands a little bit around it, starting to gain broader adoption. But you can see there are specific, very tightly regulated types of constructs that can work with this within Prepaid. And so I think that it's really about the types of companies that have very specific problems that they're trying to solve, and that they've embraced innovation, they've embraced the platforms that can support that. And Prepaid continues to be a great place to solve those types of problems. So I think that that's why we're seeing that in all these different use cases, whether these are consumer problems or whether these are commercial spend types of problems. Oftentimes you can solve a lot of these based upon the innovations and the technology in these platforms.
Thanks. Julie, would love to hear from you on this as well.
Yeah, Jennifer, as you mentioned, I have been around prepaid for 20 years, but really in the capacity of where payments and marketing kind of intersect. And in the early days, prepaid was a payment replacement for checks because it was cheaper, easier, faster. And that still continues to be the case today. Where I see real innovation is utilizing prepaid to drive behavior versus just a payment mechanism after that behavior has already occurred. So if you think about wanting to drive the purchase of your product or a visit to your business, with the combination of marketing campaigns, the ability to do SMS text messages, and providing consumers with money upfront. Here's your virtual card. If you do this step, that card will become activated for you. So it's I would say more proactive than reactive is kind of the trends and innovation that we're seeing within this world of marketing and payments and where they intersect.
Thanks, Julie. That's great. We've got a question from the floor. That was one that we were going to talk about for sure today. And the question is, can you give insights to the fraud mitigation technology that surrounds prepaid? And one of the things, when we'd been talking about this topic ahead of time, I do a lot of these panels in both Canada and the US, and fraud and AML always come up as a topic, and we continue to see that prepaid sort of has this reputation for fraud that doesn't necessarily play out in the data. And so I'd love to have our panelists talk just a little bit about that. And Gaurav, I think you'd be the best person to start there.
Yeah, this is a very important topic, and again, like as we go back to the early days when we were setting up the platform, this was probably the most talked about topic, and spent a lot of time with our fraud and AML partners thinking about this foundationally. I mean, it came down to like the two aspects to it. One is the perception of it, and the other one is what it really is. Perception of it is given that what sort of categories and what sort of use cases used to exist, and how prepaid was used just to put some bucks and given, like it saw fraud numbers which traditionally. When we got into the conversation and we wanted to use prepaid for a use case in Mydoh, we really thought about what sort of guardrails it could allow us, and how do we build the construct around it. So right from the get-go, understanding from a regulatory perspective, what sort of ID verification capability you put right up front. So when we set up Mydoh, we built it very carefully, where when parent joins us, for example, we verify their identity from right in the beginning, and we brought them over to the platform. And then we're giving them secure channels, whether through RBC or through non-RBC channels, to be able to bring money into the platform. But we've already verified their identity, so there is a lot of comfort there, and it's a similar. It's a similar standard of verifying the identity that you would do it opening a regular bank account. And then on the other side, we built on the kid side, we built a platform where we allowed parents to bring the kids, but the flow of money comes only through the parents. So that just creates just indirect guardrails for us to avoid bringing money which is not unaccounted for. So I think that sort of thinking right up front, going into the platform, really allowed us. Then it was, to be honest, it wasn't about prepaid or not. It was just about how do we build this and what sort of guardrails we build it. And it also allowed us to, and that's specific to prepaid, it allowed us to set limits and throttle those. So when we launched it with smaller limits. We both on the kid side and on the parent side, we tested with smaller limits. We tested our fraud rates. And honestly, like we didn't see much fraud, and we opened up the platform more broadly, and it seemed end-to-end more secure.
Scott, I know you have both some data on this and also you probably have your myth fact sheet, right, on fraud that you're constantly talking about. Would you mind just sharing that with us?
Yeah, for sure. I think Gaurav talked a lot about some of these pieces, but just some other areas to think about, as you look about, the data behind fraud versus, the actual numbers that we see on our platform. And I think we break it out into two big buckets. Number one is, how do we prevent fraudulent dollars from getting into the payments ecosystem, right? So we talked, Gaurav talked a lot about, very tight KYC processes and innovative KYC processes that I think, we can leverage technology to better identify who someone is versus just going up and pinging up against a credit bureau, right? So there's a lot of different things that we're seeing in the marketplace. Say, how do we leverage technology to better understand, who this customer is? And also along those lines, being able to leverage various aspects. I know on our platform of, if you want to look at different load types that can come in, various ways that we can track load types, because some ways of money coming into a platform could potentially be riskier than others. So there's different things that we can do with hold days and ways to look at that, or timeframes that we can prevent. Again, what we're trying to do on the front end is prevent fraudulent dollars from ever getting into the marketplace. When you see, actual that we see from a spend side, as we look at the way our platform works and how we partner with Visa and MasterCard, if you're fully consuming the MasterCard Decision Intelligence Score, which we do, the Visa or the Visa Risk Score and the neural nets that they're running on their platform, we've built on our system a lot of velocity controls, limits, tolerances that we can set up, as well as we've built our own fraud rules engine. When you're running all of those different levels of fraud mitigation and a strong KYC process, what we're really seeing on our platform is about 3 to 4 basis points. Maybe it varies, maybe it's 5, maybe some months it might be 2, but 3 or 4 basis points of loss is what we're traditionally seeing as far as fraud loss on our platform when you're running all of those various aspects of a program. So I think that what we're seeing, again, certainly, and that's very common in prepaid, that again, I think there are some misconceptions versus the data that we see on our platform as far as actual basis points of loss on card spend.
Thanks, Scott. Chanddeep, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I find this fascinating because one of the issues, I was a CFO at our previous company, and when fraud was a very, it was a prevalent topic. We had a full compliance team and building tools, working with our processors and working with our issuer and how in the US on how to mitigate it. But even in that, I still saw a lot of fraud coming through and that we had to stop. So I think it's great that people are getting tools built out there that can support them. And, that was in the US about 3 years ago. So I'm sure there are advancements that have happened since then, but I definitely see fraud as a pretty big issue within this industry. And one of the reasons, just looking towards, I'm going to go healthcare specific, there's about $130 billion worth of fraud that happens in the health insurance space. And that's not including prepaid. Right. So that just typically when you're filing claims and you're putting in claims, there was a case, I'm sure you guys have heard of the TTC in Ontario, and then other companies have come out and said like, hey, there were some employees filing fraudulent claims. You see this, and this is something when we pitch our value proposition out there to insurance carriers, we are saying, listen, we've got KYC, KYB on the advisors that we work with. Then we do KYC or KYB on the companies that these advisors bring on. We do KYC on the plan administrators after that too, to make sure that they're legitimate. Then we're using Google APIs to make sure the cards are being swiped at appropriate healthcare merchants, using MCC codes afterwards to making sure that they're the right merchants. And then sometimes MCC codes are right, sometimes they're not, right? So how do you work with that, and then taking all of that data, working with third-party providers and saying, can you work with us to give us a list of the medical providers that you have in Canada? And then after all of that baseline, we've built our own adjudication engine, our own machine learning adjudication engine on top. So we don't see any fraud, touch wood, come in so far, and we really build in tools to prevent that. And moving forward, we're using things like decision tree and anomaly detection on top of the software that's already being provided to us by our processor partners or our banking partners who are taking a look at everything that we're doing. So I I do see that the value proposition of my company especially is how can we take fraud away from the insurance industry? And just to give you a little bit of idea, one of the things that happens in our industry is when you submit a healthcare insurance claim, only 5 to 10% of those claims get reviewed. And that happens by somebody manually checking your receipt, calling up the provider and saying, hey, is this a legitimate claim? And that's only 5 to 10%. And this is reality for everybody who has health insurance on this call, right? What we do is we adjudicate 100% of claims. And we do that through all of the systems that I just pointed out, and building our machine learning adjudication system on top. So it's reinforced learning, right? So everything that comes in, we've got algorithms that are building that again and again and again. And working with insurance carriers and other partners that have this data, we've been able to build a very robust engine. And moving forward, that's what's going to be required, because I don't see fraud going away. I just think the solutions that we need to build and bring to the market need to be more advanced and need to be, I think this is what's fascinating to me the most about this industry, is I see more people working together, right? And I see more of that co-elevation and co-creation happening across the industry. And I love that, because people are coming together to say, how can we bring the best solutions, the best technology, the best fraud mitigation strategies together to the market? And I think that's fascinating, and I'm a huge proponent of that. And that's what's
thanks to all of you for your thanks to all of you for your thoughts on that. So that was a great discussion. We've had a couple of questions here in the chat on some pretty specific issues with respect to FinTrack requirements and ID verifications, et cetera. Since we don't have any, chief compliance officers or, head of legal on the panel today, I'm not going to ask you specifically. I do, though, want our participants to know that at cppo.ca, which is the CPPO website, we actually have a lot of resources that go through exactly the questions that are being asked. So if you head there, cppo.ca, and maybe the team can just put that into the chat, and you head to the resources section, you will see that we have a number of legal resources there that you can take a look at. And if you have further or deeper questions, one, I'll just make a plug for joining the CPPO, or you can email info@cppos.ca and we can get those questions answered. But thank you for putting them through. Okay, let's switch gears for a second and talk about really maybe some of the operational issues that come up if you're launching a new program. So I'm sure we have a lot of participants today that are entrepreneurs, CEOs of new and innovative companies that are looking to use prepaid to launch their exciting solutions into market. And Julie, I'm going to pick on you because you've been in this field for a really long time. You've started numerous companies. You're an investor and an advisor. If you had a couple of pieces of advice in terms of just operational issues, how to get started, a couple of those things, I think it would be great for our participants to hear from you.
Sure. So I think first and foremost, hire a great compliance officer to your last point. It's important to understand the regulatory and compliance landscape for this industry. Operationally, it's about getting a great supply chain together. So, finding the right program manager who has the processor, the issuing bank, the card brand relationships, really leaning on that supply chain where the expertise lies. And then really, then you have the ability to be innovative with what your core competency is. But I think it's really about relying on the expertise that's been around in the industry for a long time. I just made a plug for you, Scott.
Again, on the CPPO website, right on our homepage, we have the entire heat map of the Canadian prepaid market. So as Julie was saying, if you're looking for, how do you build out your value chain of who you need to launch your program, that shows you all the best players there. Gaurav, why don't you walk us through a couple of thoughts on that, having just launched a new program and an innovative one through RBC?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think initially, especially for those who are starting off early, Even if we had full like we really wanted to launch it within 6 to 9 months, we took first couple of months, to Julie's point, really understood the regulatory framework and what are the restrictions which are available, and then applied those restrictions on top of our use case to be able to build what that construct could look like in the live version. And I think that was the most important piece of work. It took time, but so can't emphasize enough on how important that specific part is. And then I would say the second key thing was to keep a use case simple to begin with. Like definitely the supply chain part which Julie talked about, we made sure that we checked on all those areas. Like we had all the partners lined up. But apart from that, like we started with a simple use case where we wanted to build a single relationship between parent and the kid under the Mydoh bucket, and allow them to do basic couple of things: that ability to add funds, ability to send funds, ability to spend funds. So we didn't add bells and whistles to begin with, and that truly allowed us to see where and because that's the foundation of it. Even today, and when we are growing, these components are still the most important operational components of our business. So we were able to really see where we needed to plug in some of the ops pieces, and we saw that. Like an example probably would be when people wanted to close an account, how would you give them their funds back? Like that's a very simple ops challenge. Can we, and if we saw more traffic, is there an opportunity to automate this? Is there an opportunity to put algorithms to be able to even predict it early stage? Then we started building those type of plugs from that perspective. And the other side, being the consumer app side, it is no different than any other banking or fintech capability, where from ops perspective, making sure that your customer care is quite automated and is enabled. We actually went digital first customer care. So it's a chat capability we started with, and we are able to keep up with it. So again, that it didn't matter if it was prepaid or not. We felt that sort of ops capability allowed us to manage that sort of workflow.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from anybody else on that?
Yeah, I'll add something quickly, Jennifer. I think Gaurav and Julie touched on a lot of it, but we see a lot of new type of entrants that come to the marketplace all the time, and it's really as we think about trying to balance the speed to market approach with really the right value that you need from the mid to long term. And we'll have people that'll come to us that'll say, listen, I need to be out the door in 45 days. I need every feature I've possibly dreamed of. My bank's going to approve everything day one, and I'm going to cure cancer at the same time, right? I mean, you get all of these things that kind of come at you, and you say, well listen, we can move very quickly. We've published our APIs. We've gone through and gone through a lot of different fast track options, but we also try and be realistic. And I think that's part of this as well, that from an operational perspective, that you've got to make sure that you do have the basic, foundation and these layers, and I think Gaurav touched a lot on it. It's got to have, we're happy to build all sorts of great features and functions and work with partners. But if you're trying to get something out, you've got to have some realistic expectations on timing on that speed to market side. And then really look at that to say, who are the right partners in the ecosystem that you need for the mid to long term? Because too often we'll see companies that will start down one direction, and then they'll come back and they'll say, that just didn't work. We didn't really understand some of the challenges that we were going to face. Can we try and build something else, with you, Galileo? So we've seen that quite a bit. But again, I think it's just trying to balance that rapid, got to get something out versus, really what is the best solution for you over the mid to long term.
And I'm just going to add something to, this entrepreneurial journey for everybody who's on the call. They know it's not easy, and it's a lot of fun at the same time, because you just learn so much every single day. And launching a new product, it's going to take longer than you envisioned. It's just going to. I've done it too many times. It's going to take longer than what you think. And I think it's just, how connected are you? How connected is your support system? And really using that to support you. With us, when we work with our banking partners and with our processors, we knew we were going to take, like, is this going to be longer than what we had envisioned? And we put in constraints when we were negotiating our contracts to make sure that we don't start burning cash when we don't need to. And that is something that I really see with new companies working with partners is, can you work with your partners to build a product and push out that cash burn, and do that until you're getting a lot of volume and until you've launched the product? And what I found personally with our partners is that they were very, very willing to support us in that. And that's come a lot from our background in there. So preserve cash, because it's very, very important early on. And we've gone out and raised a pre-seed round, we raised a seed round now, and we're going to be raising our Series A next year. So we definitely know how important that cash is, especially during COVID time. And when you're building a startup, it was quite challenging. But know that it's going to take longer than you envision, and just put in those mitigation strategies. One of our investors always kept asking me questions on, like, what would you do if this happened? What would you do if this happened? And at first it was annoying because, like, like, okay, well, we're doing due diligence, but they're asking this many questions. But all of that diligence, all of those external edge use cases really helped us think about what kind of solutions we want to bring into the market. So ultimately, preserve cash if you're starting a company, and then work with your partners to push out that cash outflow as much as you can, and use their resources to your advantage, because you'll be able to give them all of that volume and all of that revenue back as you're growing. So make sure that you understand that you're building this together as a team, even though they're different companies.
Great. That's all great. Just awesome advice from all of you. Thank you for sharing based on your experience. So one of the things that we know is important that each company can't do themselves and each entrepreneur can't do themselves is have the right regulatory environment and payment system for us to operate in. And as we know, there's a lot that is changing in Canada and being discussed right now. So highly specific to prepaid, just to let our panelists know, at the CPPO, one of the government relations issues we are tackling really heavily is trying to harmonize regulations at the provincial level so that prepaid, open loop prepaid products are not regulated as gift cards, as they still are in several of the provinces. That really hinders the ability to enter these new markets. So that's a really very specific thing that we're doing to make the the ecosystem work better for everyone. But I'd really love to know, particularly from our, Canadian panelists, we're going through this payments modernization process, have been for a while, but the voices from the pay tech community seem to be getting louder and louder with respect to access, open banking, when's the real-time rail coming, those kind of things. And at the heart of this issue, I think, is this tension, right, between security and innovation in financial services in Canada with fintech growing so much. And I'd love to get your thoughts on, are we striking a right balance there? What's really needed to continue to spur financial services innovation in Canada? Are we going too far one way versus the other? Maybe Gaurav, we can start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, the open banking, the trend, I'm not an expert, but from the trend perspective, what we've seen in the UK as well, it's sooner or later, we expect to see that kick in. It's a matter of when it will come in. If I see what's available today, it allows us to build a use case. It allows us to launch it. I think it comes down to enabling seamless services. I think that's where we could potentially see gap. When we compare, especially to the U.S. markets and the U.K. markets, where the services are available and open banking is more known, and consumers have a lot more flexibility to be able to share the data as they would like. So I think it's a matter of time when it comes in. But more tactically, if I look at the availability of services, even when we were launching this product, I think we were able to get all the services we needed to be able to launch it. I remember when we started talking about the recurring uploads, so recurring loads into the platform. we saw very limited options, for example, and we saw only, okay, maybe we have to go towards the ACH capability to be able to load money. There are no other money services. I think there are pockets of services which, if Payments Canada, with the overall payment modernization, when those services are enabled, that will truly help not just the fintechs, I would say even the bank use cases like ours, we would be able to use those services to enable better experiences as well.
Chan, do you have a perspective on that? Oh, I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I'll just jump in really quick, and then Sean, if you can chime in. Yeah, I think what's very interesting is as we look at it, it's interesting as you compare, the various geographies, again, where we work, Canada, US, Mexico, pre-COVID, I was, at an open banking forum in the EU. And it's interesting to see, the real-time payments, through faster payments in the UK or SPAY transactions in Mexico. The US is just now finally getting to some same-day ACH type of payments. I think this is where you're going to continue to see that, that we need to modernize and innovate more. That type of payment system, I think, will be critical as you look at this going forward, as far as being able to do real-time payments. Now, again, I know that that's not going to happen tomorrow, but as we look at that, there are a lot of payment systems around the world where you're going to see that. And I think that where this ultimately will end up is you'll start to be able to say, listen, if I need to do a payment from Canada to Brazil, as an example, to an account in Brazil, I think there's a number of companies that are looking at that, to be able to allow those type of payments between even country to country in real-time type of scenarios. So I think that's where, as you look at this from a regulatory perspective, I think that and open banking are going to continue to be some of the key areas that we'll need to innovate in multiple geographies, because this is something that there's a lot of momentum that's growing in these areas.
Thanks, Scott. I personally have not found the Canadian ecosystem to be as supportive as other countries' ecosystem, and that's after building a company in the US, and I've been to India where they've got things like Paytm, where every rickshaw vendor on the street has a bank account and has a QR code, and you can buy oranges off the side of the street and use your phone to pay. Same thing in China, same thing in the US, same thing in the EU. I just don't see the Canadian ecosystem as very supportive to be able to launch companies quickly. And that's just coming from personal experience. I know that's maybe folks may not like hearing that, but it's the truth. And what I've also found is that just building new companies in the payments ecosystem in Canada has been challenging, because the financial ecosystem and the infrastructure that has been set up at partners such as processors or issuers, bin sponsors, is not adequate for us to be able to launch innovative solutions as much as we were able to in the United States. So we had to build what was readily available through APIs in the US ourselves. And it proved to be it's proved to be, and it's going to continue to prove to be a very competitive advantage for us, because now we have an ecosystem of processors, bin sponsors, ID verification vendors, card fulfillment vendors that we've tapped into. And then we've built our own omnibus accounts, API-based ledgering system on top of it, so that we can track money movement. And we've had to do that ourselves. But now what that allows us to do is, if there's a company out there that wants to launch a payment solution out in the marketplace, they don't have to wait years or spend $1 million to do that. They can just use our APIs. We have a full ledgering system built that they can use to be able to launch a product out there in 2 months or 3 months and pay a couple $100,000 for it and start realizing revenue very, very quickly. So, and another portion, I hear a lot in Canada about real-time payments, but when I'm talking to the users out there, I don't hear them ever talk about real-time payments. I don't hear that. I hear, how can we work with the solution better? How can you make it easier for us to file claims? How can you make it easier for us to not have to worry about reimbursement at all, right? So, I understand this, and I went to a Payments Canada conference 2 years ago, but there was a lot of real-time payments and conversation. But open banking, I'm a huge fan of, but I think there's more innovation that's needed just from innovative companies coming in and with established corporations making it easier to work with these innovative companies, and or come work with us. We built a solution. You can launch a product in 2 months out there. So I think that's the change that needs to happen, and I think fintech and that growth, working with established partners, is going to be the way to do it.
Thanks to all of you for all your candid discussion and predictions and advice today. This is fantastic. We're down to our last 4 minutes, and I'd like to ask each of you to close us out with one prediction on what you think financial services is going to look like in a post-COVID environment. So, Gaurav, why don't we start with you?
It's a loaded question. I would say like the accelerated pace of change towards digital, especially through the COVID period, will create a real opportunity both for fintechs as well as for banks. And I think that would be the big trend as we come out of the COVID period. And I also think that it could potentially create some sort of challenges around skill gaps as we see more digital savvy use cases, as well as the requirements in terms of what sort of talent people will look for.
Thank you. Julie?
I would say the word I would use is choice. And I think it's going to be all about choice. And whether your recipient is a consumer or an employee or somebody else, giving those recipients the ability to choose how they get paid, when they get paid. And this is, to Gaurav's point, why digital, really the move towards digital happened even faster during the pandemic, because people wanted to get paid immediately and oftentimes virtually. So I think it's going to be about choice.
Scott?
I think the only good thing about COVID was the move towards digital and contactless, like Harv and Julie have said. What was interesting to watch on our platform is just to see, as COVID was hitting and kind of the shutdown, we're thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? And just the number of digital type of payments and contactless payments that have happened now over the last 12, 15, 16 months, it's really unbelievable. Almost every new program that we launch now on our platform is some type of digital first program, not full, doesn't mean they won't also have a physical card, but being able to instantly push to an Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay wallet type of program right now is just almost like table stakes, where that was kind of like super new and innovative 12, 15 months ago. It's just how I see this continuing to grow. So I think the big winner coming out of this is definitely going to be just this continued move towards digital and contactless first payments.
Awesome. Chanddeep?
I echo Scott. Digital and contactless is definitely moving in the right direction. And I think what we're going to see is, now that people are coming out of this COVID environment, there's going to be a more risk appetite for new solutions. So I'm pretty excited for that. And just seeing innovation come into the market, that's always exciting and it's always enjoyable.
That's great. Well, to all of you who listened today, if this is a topic that continues to be of interest to you and you're interested in more content on it, the CPPO next week, actually, on June 9th, we are having a one-day symposium virtually on prepaid. So it's an entire day of prepaid content. It's totally free. So you can go to cppo.ca to sign up, and we'd love to see you all there. I would like to thank all of our panelists today. This is truly a dream team of experts on the prepaid market. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights with our audience. So thank you to all of you who attended and to our panelists, and enjoy the rest of the Payments Canada Summit today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.